Okay, let's settle down, please. So next up, we want to look at Kant's incredibly influential essay titled Perpetual Peace. This essay has had a huge impact on international relations and also on political science. And in this essay, Kant wants to look at the question of what is necessary, what is needed to create world peace. Here I am reminded that Kant becomes a bit like one of those beauty pageant contestants. Have you seen that movie with Sandra Bullock? What is it called? Miss Congeniality, right? And Sandra Bullock goes into this as an undercover agent, yes, I watch a lot of chick flicks, sorry. She goes into a beauty pageant, and whenever somebody is asked, okay, what should be, if you could make one wish, what would you wish for? They all have the same answer: world peace. So Kant is also being a beauty pageant and saying, I want world peace. But how do we get it? He begins by telling us that, he says, the practical politician tends to look down with great smugness on the political theorist. For example, when I talk to some people, they say, what do you teach? I say political science. They say, how can you teach political? We practice political science. You only teach it. And so often teachers, people will say things like, people who do. People who can't, teach. So, but then Kant says that these politicians regard him as an academic whose empty ideas cannot endanger the nation, right? So on the one hand, they look at him with great smugness, but on the other hand, you can see in their attitude something quite contradictory. Kant says, now if he is to be consistent, the practical politician must not claim in the event of a dispute with the theorist to detect some danger to the nation in those views that the political theorist expresses openly and without ulterior motive. On the one hand, you say, oh, these silly intellectuals sitting at LUMS, what do they know about the real world? और ये बेज़रर किस्म के इंटेलेक्चुअल्स हैं, वहीं बस अपनी ईगो मसाज कर रहे हैं, कहानियाँ सुना रहे हैं, वगैरह वगैरह. On the other hand, every time they do something of this sort, everybody says, oh my God, we must not allow them to speak on this or that forum. इनको इस festival से ban करो, उस festival से ban करो, वगैरह वगैरह. On the one hand, the two both can't be true at the same time. If we are totally just talking rubbish and massaging our own egos, then how is it that we are able to persuade so many people? And if we are totally impotent as intellectuals, then why are you so scared of us? Says Immanuel Kant. But we must listen carefully to what the political theorist says. First of all, Kant begins by telling us that no treaty of peace that tacitly reserves issues for a further war it can be valid. What he means by this is that a treaty that is merely a truce cannot create perpetual peace, first of all. So we have to understand, like India, Pakistan ke aapas mein ladai hai, let's say over Kashmir. And we've gone to war many times with each other, and then we've also had peace. But that peace was not a perpetual one, because it was merely a cessation of armed hostilities for the moment. We didn't solve the problem between India and Pakistan, so very soon we went to war again. So to create perpetual peace, you may need a truce, but you have to solve the problem that makes states go to war. Not just make states undertake a truce, because then they'll just go to war again, solve the problem. No independent nation, be it large or small, may be acquired by another nation by inheritance, exchange, purchase, or gift. You cannot take over entire countries by inheritance, ke ye main uska badshah tha, now I've given it to this state, etc. Exchange kar liya, like Alaska was bought, purchase kar liya, gift kar liya. These sort of actions will inevitably cause war, because nations must be able to determine their own destiny. You can't give away an entire people to a state or to another state, etc. And if you do that, there is going to be war. Standing armies shall be gradually abolished, he says. What? This sounds very strange, but he says, Standing armies constantly threaten other nations. They compete with one another. Paying men to kill or be killed uses them as mere machines and tools in the hands of another. If you create large armies, sometime or the other, you spend all that money creating the army, sometime or the other you are going to use them. You don't just create them, to sit in the barracks waiting one day, when we are attacked, then we will retaliate. That's what you tell everybody, but the reality is that when you have large armies, you also have a very large incentive to attack your enemy and to gain the advantage over your enemy. So standing armies, if you have standing armies across the globe, you're going to have war. It's just how things work. No national debt shall be contracted in connection with the foreign affairs of the nation. Forbidding foreign debt must be a preliminary article for perpetual peace. If you have entire countries that are in debt to other countries or other groups of countries, what kind of peace can you have? You're going to inevitably have conflict and war, because some countries that are under debt will be used by other countries, resentment will build up, there will be war and conflict between debtor nations and nations that feel indebted to other nations, and nations that are giving out loans to other nations, etc. Any country that is indebted to another country financially can never exercise true and real political, economic or social independence. Just as a person who is, जो मकरूज हो जाए किसी दूसरे से, आपके पे कर्जा चढ़ जाए, तो उसके बाद you can never be free, because you have to pay back that debt, and to pay back that debt I can determine the terms and conditions under which the debt has to be paid back. For example, if you have given some property as collateral, then I can take that property away. Now countries cannot and do not give property as collateral, but they do have another problem, which is that if they don't pay back the debt, then they can't continue to engage in that trade, that international trade. And since these countries are highly dependent on that international trade for their societies and their economies to continue functioning, no government can afford to not trade internationally. So Immanuel Kant says कि ऐसी situation में how can we have peace when we have whole countries indebted to other countries? No nation shall forcibly interfere with the constitutional government of another nation. आप किसी मुल्क के अंदर घुस जाते हैं, उधर कानूनी तब्दीलियां करना शुरू कर देते हैं, वहाँ डिक्टेटरशिप सपोर्ट करना शुरू कर देते हैं, वहाँ सिविल वॉर सपोर्ट करना शुरू कर देते हैं, तो कैसे अमन पैदा होगा दुनिया के अंदर? नहीं पैदा हो सकता. अपने घर का मामला अपने घर में रखो, किसी और के घर में जाके उल्ट फुल्ट हरकतें ना करो. ठीक है ना? So no nation at war with another shall permit such act of war as shall make mutual trust impossible during some future time of peace. So in other words, using chemical weapons, using nuclear weapons, using weapons against humanity, doing economic war, sabotage, etc. These are sending spies, instigating murder, assassination, poisoning people, breach of surrender, etc. These are things that will break down trust. Don't do them. War of extermination must be prohibited at all costs. A war of extermination would permit perpetual peace to occur only in the vast graveyard of humanity as a whole. That's why Kant would be totally against nuclear weapons or weapons of any kind of mass destruction. Such a war, including all means used to wage it, must be abolished, absolutely prohibited. So nuclear war weapons, chemical weapons, these sort of weapons of mass destruction must be destroyed. Kant says these are you might consider these things to be a bit utopian. How can you destroy standing armies and weapons of mass destruction and all of these things? He doesn't care that you consider them utopian, whether you consider them realistic or not. What he cares about is, what do we need to do to create world peace? He said, this is what you have to do. If you don't do this, it's not going to happen. Now the choice is yours. You can't find this utopian, then continue living this life where people continue to go to war. But if you implement it, then there is a chance that you can have real peace. He continues, the state of peace amongst men living in close proximity is not the natural state. He gives in to Hobbes here, saying, yes, people go to war. The natural state is a state of war. The state of peace must therefore be established, for suspension of hostilities does not provide the security of peace. But peace can come about. It's not the natural condition of man, but it can be created. We can go against what nature has ordained for us. And we do all the time. For example, you get up in the morning, your natural condition was that your breath smelled really bad. Your natural condition was that your hair was all over the place. Your natural condition was that you had grime all over your body. But you got up, you took a bath. Well, most of you probably didn't, but anyway, you combed your hair, you brushed your teeth, कोई सुर्खी पाउडर आपने लगाया होगा, फिर आप आए क्लास में, you changed your natural condition. Right? We do this all the time. The natural condition of man is not even to wear clothes, yet we wear clothes. It's not natural. The natural condition is not to be sitting in front of this artificial light. This is artificial light. Correct? Yet we do that. So not everything natural is inevitable. This is the important point to realize. Man, by their actions and consciousness, changes nature and can change their own nature. And that's what Kant is trying to say. The natural condition may be war, but we can change that condition because we don't reconcile to everything that nature gives us. We change nature for our benefit. We do this all the time. Why do we have science? What does science do? What does electricity do? It gives us lighting when there is no lighting. It gives us light at night. Is that natural? Of course it's not natural. But we do it. The water and the food we have, is it natural? Of course it's not natural. Broiler chicken, we inject it with, special whatever growth hormones and then we eat it. Correct? Is that natural? No. It would be natural if I didn't put on any deodorant this morning. But believe me, if all of us didn't put on any deodorant, all the women in this classroom would run away. And the men would be saying, Sir, theek hai. Aise hi hai. There was once upon a time when I was 13 years old, or 14, 15, I was a teenager. And my friend said, Taimur, don't you use deodorant? And I said, no. I like, one should be natural, I said to him. Needless to say, that friendship didn't last very long. No, actually, we're still friends. But then I realized, just because something is natural doesn't mean it's good. Potty also is natural. Doesn't mean I shouldn't clean myself. Correct? War may be natural, but it is not inevitable. We can change it. The constitution of every nation should be a republic, says Kant, because it accords with the principle of freedom, the principles of dependence of everyone, a single common source of legislation, and it considers all citizens as equal. In a republic, since the consent of the citizens is required in order to determine whether or not there will be war, it is natural that they consider all its calamities before committing themselves to so risky a venture. People pay the price of war, so people should be involved in the decision of whether to go to war or not. And where they are involved, people tend to prefer peace rather than to go to war. Republicanism is that principle whereby executive power is separated from legislative power. In a despotism, the ruler independently executes laws that it has itself made. Here, rulers have taken hold of the public will and treat it as their own private will, which is obviously not a good thing. Democracy, however, so he is in favor of a republic, but he is not in favor of democracy, Immanuel Kant. Please note. He says this is unnecessary despotism. It sets up an executive power in which all citizens make decisions about and, if need be, against one. Consequently, all who are not quite all, this cites so that the general will contradicts both itself and freedom. Frederick II, for example, said, I am merely the nation's highest servant. The democratic system makes this impossible, for everyone wants to rule. Not everyone can rule. So what Kant is talking about here is a form of democracy that would be very, very direct, in which everybody got to take the decision, and there would not necessarily be representation. The smaller the number of persons who exercise the power of the nation, the more they represent, and the closer the political constitution approximates the possibility of republicanism. So a small number of people must take the decision, but that small number of people must represent the people. The right of nations shall be based on the federation of free states. Each nation sees its majority to consist in not being subject to any external legal constraints. Majesty, sorry, not majority. It's majesty. So, pabandiyan nahi lagani. We have to create a federation of states. Each nation can and should demand that the others enter into a contract resembling the civil one and guaranteeing the rights of each. And finally, we create a league of peace, which will be distinguished from a treaty of peace, because the latter merely stops one war. The league will stop all wars altogether. Will stop war altogether. It should include all nations, and this will lead to perpetual peace. When powerful and enlightened people form a republic, it will provide a focal point for a federal association amongst other nations that will join it in order to guarantee a state of peace amongst nations. That is in accord with the idea of the right of nations, and through several associations of this sort, such a federation can extend further and further. Of course, the League of Nations is precisely this League of Peace that Kant wanted to see. His influence is so great. Finally, the cosmopolitan right shall be given, and universal hospitality should be extended. The right of an alien not to be treated as an enemy upon his arrival in another country must be held sacrosanct all over the world. We must give everybody the right to visit, to associate. The earth belongs to all men by virtue of the common ownership of the earth's surface. Nature's provisional arrangement consists in the following: that nature has made it such that as a result of war, mankind has spread all over the globe. And also as a result of war, it has driven mankind to create law, to avoid war. And now all over the world, we must establish relationships that avoid any future possibility of war. War is bad because it produces more evil people than it eliminates. It creates violent men. So I can see that you're shuffling about, but I have only one more slide to go. So let me just finish that slide, and then you can leave. Kant says the desire of every nation is to establish an enduring peace, hoping, if possible, to dominate the entire world. But nature wills otherwise. She uses two means to prevent people from intermingling and to separate them: differences in language and religion. These differences do exist in nature, differences of language and religion, and oftentimes we see that people go to war over these differences. But if you have a republican constitution, he says, this is the only constitution compatible with the rights of men, and it is the only constitution that can guarantee long-term, perpetual world peace. Nature irresistibly wills that right should finally triumph. In this fashion, nature guarantees perpetual peace by virtue of the mechanism of man's inclinations themselves. Man wants a better life. And although at one point human nature set it out such that we, as a consequence of war with each other, spread across the world, it is self-inclination itself, self-interest, a better life for all ourselves, that creates within us the will, the power, the intellect to come to an agreement with each other, not to go to war with each other. Liberals are of the view that human nature, therefore, Kantian liberals in particular, are of the view that although human nature may have been one way or another, human nature is malleable. It can be changed through education and through enlightenment, through creating the right atmosphere for broad-mindedness and for peace. That kings shall be philosophers, or philosophers kings, is neither to be expected nor to be desired. For the possession of power inevitably corrupts reason's free judgment. He seems to be answering to Plato. However, that kings or sovereign people who rule themselves by law of equality should not allow the class of philosophers to disappear or to be silent, but should permit them to speak publicly, is indispensable to the enlightenment of their affairs. Philosophers may not become kings, kings may not become philosophers, this may not even be desirable. But if you prohibit philosophers from exercising the public use of reason, you will snuff out the enlightenment of your own society. You will ruin your own society. That's it for today. Thank you very much.